So I have talked about endurance, I have talked about evasion, and this final video in this series of defensive stats in Throne and Liberty is about the other stats. As I was mentioning in the first video, endurance for me is the worst stat, evasion is the best stat, and we have much other stats that are very usable, especially more than endurance in my opinion. As I mentioned in the endurance video, we have heavy attack evasion and critical damage resistance. These two stats are very good, but why? Why are those stats very good? Especially the heavy attack evasion. First, critical damage resistance. Because what does a critical mean? A critical is just the attack with the highest base damage, but that's often irrelevant. That's not that much of a difference, except for a few skills as I mentioned in the endurance video. But what matters is the extra critical damage you get from some classes. That it's 40%, 50%, 60%. That's a lot. So if you build critical damage resistance, you are actually mitigating the problem of receiving a critical hit. That's why, for me, it's a very good stat. What is the problem? That you cannot really build that much critical damage resistance. You only can do that if you use certain artifacts, the wildland artifacts, if you use some synergies. I don't remember which one actually, but if I recall correctly was bracelet and belt, if I recall correctly. You now have the heroic items with an heroic trait, which is critical damage resistance as well. So we are starting to have more choices for critical damage resistance. But if someone is really investing into critical damage, I may be wrong here, but I think we cannot get enough damage resistance to fully mitigate this. However, most people are going to have, for example, a spectral set or a imperial set. That's 25%, okay? So 25 or imperial was a little more, I think. I don't have an imperial item right now here, but more or less people will have these numbers plus some extra effects. For example, the crossbow has some mastery, some skills, the dagger has the passive, etc. So the more we reduce this critical damage, the better for us. Heavy evasion. Heavy evasion is actually very good. In fact, it's the first thing to invest in my opinion, for this reason. We can have hit by a lot. I mean, we can have hit, I saw you, as I was showing in the evasion video. In my opinion, hit nowadays range between these numbers, but we can have even more. Critical will be the same within these numbers, but also there are people with 2.8, 3k, 3.2, etc. However, heavy attack, you cannot build that much. Heavy attack range from basically 0 or let's say 100 to maybe 500 on average to like 1.2 more or less. Yes, some people could have a little more, but these are the most standard numbers. And what does this mean? That you cannot build that much. So if you boost your heavy evasion just by using artifacts and runes, not even needing to use the Blossom of Regalia and the warmonger, no, the warmonger, no, the other, the other Gilded Belt, without even using these two items, just by using the runes and artifacts, you can get like about 500 evasion, okay? Heavy evasion. If we add 500 heavy evasion, look at this. All the numbers are basically down. These are completely negated from 33 to 0. This is negated, and this was lowered something, 13%. If we add these two items, over here, where are you? This is already even more down, okay? And in fact, you can boost them then even more, because I remember having almost 900. So if with the combination of the runes, artifacts, and these items, reach to like this number more or less. So look at this, 28% chance. Things are starting to get down. Now we have even the heroic items with heavy attack evasion. So this goes more down. And that's the thing, that you cannot build that much heavy attack chance, but you can, and as you cannot build that much heavy attack chance, the limited amount of heavy attack evasion that you can build is already a good enough defense against the heavy attacks. So what else do we have? We have a skill damage resistance, damage reduction, and debuff duration. Skill damage resistance is a very odd stat for me. I never invest into this because for me it's just a skill that you will, a stat that you will add if you are a tank. Otherwise, you need to use your yellow runes for something else. Damage reduction, as I was saying in the endurance video, is a direct counter to bonus damage. Yes, it's not really like if I have here 163 and I have here 100, it's going to be 63. No, it's not a direct relation. Damage reduction reduces all instances of damage by that number. But when you have a heavy hitting skill, it's irrelevant. A hit doing 1k and another hit doing 900 is mostly the same. But when you have a lot of hits with a small number of damage, if you add damage reduction, it's going to be very beneficial. That's why it's a direct counter to crossbow user. And to any crossbow user, Scorpion, Fury, whatever. Because if you are building bonus damage, you are basically negating it with this stat. And that's the reason why if you build a lot of endurance and you don't build damage reduction, I don't care. I kill you easily, because if you don't have damage reduction, this damage multiplied for 5 instances of damage I'm doing in every hit is going to melt you down. So that's why if you want to defend against me, you need damage reduction. And the other stat is debuff duration. Debuff duration is a very strong stat, and many people often look at this just from the point of view of CC, and this is not. Yes, it's a good thing, but it's not the best thing from the buff duration. The buff duration is a direct counter to Curse Bombers. Because why does a Curse Bomber kill you? Because we stack curses on you and then we explode them. So if this curse is not running for the time that it should be, if you are lowering the time to 10 seconds, 8 seconds, something like that, we cannot kill you. We cannot kill you because when we explode it, all the remaining damage that you have is not high enough to get one shot. That's why many healers are now building a lot of debuff duration to prevent that, because the curses doesn't care about endurance. The curses just go through all defenses, and if you don't have debuff duration, you have a higher probability to get one shot. Same with the heavy attack evasion. If you don't have heavy attack evasion, the cures will probably kill you if they are heavy. And finally, let's talk about the CCs. We have a lot of CCs in this game, and this is a mess. They said some time ago, like, I don't remember now, in February or in March, that they were going to streamline this. Well, we are now almost in September, we have news about what's coming, and unless something new is released next week, we don't have this streamline to the CCs. And this is a problem, because basically what we have is that everyone who wants to deal with CCs build either weaken resistance or collision resistance and doesn't care about the others. But the thing is that even if you care about the others, it doesn't do anything. Let's say, because I remember to build silent resistance, to add every yellow rune to silent resistance, to add silent resistance on a straight, add a lot of silent resistance. The problem, the skills still silence you. When you get a shadow strike, you will get silenced anyway, because the base, let's say the base probability of the attack landing is high enough that no matter how much resistance do you build, if you have a lot, or if you just have the skill, you don't need to either not even invest in silence chance, you are going to get silence. I remember to do tests before the heroics with some guy about weaken chance, weaken resistance, and sleep. Okay, I had about this number, 1.4. He was so mad at me that I was always basically disable him by my mana burn and by other stuff, that he pumped up this number to 1.9 if I recall correctly. And yes, you can feel that you don't land curses as much, but you still do. So the first thing to pay attention here is that if you have more weakened resistance, it doesn't mean that you are invulnerable to that. You will still get the CC effects, just with a lower chance. That it doesn't seem to be that much lower, to be honest. Okay. And the second thing, and this may be a myth, from the beginning of the game, we have followed this logic, let's say, where we say that a hit follows a CC effect follows this path. First, you need to pass the hit against evasion check. If the attack hit, then you need to pass the weaken chance and weaken resistance check. And if that passes, then you need to pass the specific CC effect and the specific CC effect chance and resistance. I will say this is false, okay? Because in that case I was talking earlier, I had 1.4 weaken chance, he had like 1.9 or even 2k weaken resistance, and I feel like my curses and my mana burn was not as efficient, they were failing. However, my sleep was landing almost all the time. and my sleep probably was around this number because I don't add a sleep chance at all, and probably he didn't have a sleep resistance either. So I'm not so sure about what I was saying. I will say it's not hit evasion, weaken or collision, and I mean weaken or collision chance against resistance and then the specific CC. I will say it's the other way around. It's first the specific one, sleep, silence, fear, whatever, and then the generic one. I repeat, I'm not so sure about this. I based this on my test with that guy, which was like actually a month and a half ago, or maybe 2 months. But this was my experience. So I will really appreciate if you really know the answer to this and can post that in the comments, because this is a very intriguing question I have, and I think that maybe it was just some misinformation that was spread since the beginning and no one really wondered about it or never questioned that. So thanks for watching this video. This concludes this series about defensive stats, and see you on the next one.